Welcome to Dark Docent. My name is Jake. Join me as I guide my friend James down the paranormal rabbit hole, attempting to prove the authenticity of a new case each week. Today's case, the Hill Abduction. That should be good. Welcome to Dark Docent.
Very demure, very dark, very docent.
Perfect. This is a podcast where I take my friend James down the paranormal iceberg, slowly trying to get into weirder and weirder stuff each week. And my goal is to make this man believe something. How are we doing?
I'm doing great, Jake. How are you?
I'm doing fine, but nobody cares about that.
I care.
Somebody has to. I'm glad you do.
Somebody has to.
I got a story for you.
I would love to hear it.
Okay. September 19th, 1961, 10:30 p.m., Ashland, New Hampshire. Betty and Barney Hill are driving home from their honeymoon in Niagara Falls when Betty noticed that what she thought was a shooting star. You're already smiling.
The name sounds familiar, I'm going to be honest.
Maybe you've heard me spiel about it enough times at parties.
Maybe I've fired up the Joe Rogan podcast at least one time.
Betty and Barney Hill are driving home from their honeymoon in Niagara Falls when Betty noticed what she thought was a shooting star. But then the star stopped and began to move erratically, growing brighter and seemingly getting closer. Betty told Barney to pull the car over so she could get a better look with her binoculars. She said she saw an odd-shaped craft with multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon. Barney thought that it was simply a plane, commercial jet, going over to Montreal or Vermont. But that soon changed when the object began ascending towards their location. Barney and Betty got back in their car, continued their drive home, but the object continued to follow them. They moved slowly, trying to keep an eye on the object. At one point, the object flew over a restaurant and a signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the old man of the mountain. Betty claimed it was 1.5 times bigger than the 40-foot face of the mountain, and it was rotating. They continued watching its erratic movements through the night sky. They continued watching the object as it followed them for 30 miles. When they got about a mile south of Indian Head, the craft rapidly descended about 80 to 100 feet above the car, and a little more ahead. This caused Barney to stop right in the middle of the highway. He said the object took up the entire space of the windshield. It was completely silent and reminded him of a giant pancake. Barney grabbed his pistol and his binoculars, because that's what you do in 1961, and got out of his car, slowly approaching the object. He looked through his binoculars at the object. He says he saw 8 to 11 humanoid figures looking back at him through the windows. He said they had glossy black uniforms and black caps. That's when all the creatures but one moved back to what seemed to be a control panel. He heard a message in his head. Stay where you are and keep looking. That's when 2 fins began to protrude from the sides of the object, with flashing red lights on either side. A long structure came out of the bottom of the object, and then the whole craft tilted towards them. And he estimated it came down about 50 feet above the ground and was about 300 feet ahead of them. Barney was overcome with fear and ran back into the car. He stepped on the gas and sped away, the object right behind them. They began hearing what they described as a loud humming, buzzing. It was hard for them to stay conscious. And as they began to fall into a daze, everything stopped. They were driving on the road as if nothing happened. 35 miles from where they once were, with 3 hours of missing time. James, have you ever heard of the Hill Abduction?
I have heard of it. I'm going to be honest. I don't know many of the details. It is not something I could give you any information about, really. I'm just aware of it, and I'm just aware of it.
Has any of what I've told you ever come up in the few things you've heard about it?
I think this is the first time I've heard the actual, at least paid attention to the actual story of what happened, and not just people talking about the incident after the fact.
Yeah, no, they're missing 3 hours of time. When they were arriving home, what made them kind of notice this was the sun started to rise. Now, they kind of timed it that they would get home at about 3 o'clock in the morning from where they were driving from Montreal. But they saw the dawn and they realized that there's about 2 to 3 hours missing time that they could not recall. When they arrived home, the Hill stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses that they could not readily explain. Betty insisted that their luggage be kept near the back door and stack up against the door, rather than the main part of the house. Their watches were broken and they never could get repaired. Barney said that the leather strap of his binoculars was torn, though he could not recall tearing it. The toes of his best dress shoes were scraped as if he was dragged. Barney says that he was compelled to examine his genitals in the bathroom, but, aren't we all?
It's happened once or twice.
He found nothing unusual, but just felt violated. Something happened. So they were like, you know what? This is weird. We don't know what happened. Maybe it was a weird dream. Let's sleep it off. If we're still feeling the same the next day, we'll talk about it. But we say next day, but it was 5 in the morning, right? So a few hours later, they sleep. They get up the next day, and they kind of talk to each other. And they're like, did we see what we saw last night? They both agreed, yeah, okay, we still think we saw what we saw. And Barney said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll go to separate rooms. We'll each draw a picture of what we saw and bring it back. And they actually brought back images pretty similar.
Are there images of those images?
I thought you'd never ask.
Oh. Here we go, starting with the hard evidence right away.
Yes, a drawing. A drawing that someone drew on a piece of paper in the 1960s. This is one of the drawings they drew.
I would describe that as a pancake with some protrusions with presumably red lights next to them.
Mm-hmm. I believe that was Barney's drawing. I couldn't find Betty's, but Betty does have several other paintings and drawings that she has done in her time. This really actually did change a lot for Betty. So they came back. They both found something. They're like, okay, we saw something. So they tried to reconstruct the timeline of events of what happened that night. But they couldn't piece what happened after the beeping and the buzzing they heard in their heads and when they passed out. After their nap, after figuring all this stuff out, they started examining themselves, and Betty placed her shoes and the clothing she had worn during the drive into the closet. And when she took a look at them, though, she noticed that the dress was torn. The dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and in the lining. And she also saw that there was a pink powder coating this dress. So she took it and she went to hang the dress on a clothesline. And as soon as she did that, all the powder just flew off, is what she stated. Which,
very convenient.
Very convenient, but you'll find that in paranormal cases, this is common.
A lot of conveniences.
A lot of conveniences that fuck it all up. She hung the dress on the clothesline, pink powder blew away. Over the years, though, 5 laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analysis on the dress, but none of them can find anything to confirm or refute the claims of Betty and Barney Hill. So, but that wasn't the only piece of evidence that they had, luckily, other than the scrapes and things in their clothes. There was also shiny concentric circles on the car's trunk that had not been there the previous day.
Shiny concentric circles.
Yes. They said they were about the size of a $50. Well, Betty saw these, didn't really know what to make of them, and even though they agreed to keep things quiet about this, they didn't want anything to get out. Betty was okay. Barney said it's okay if you can call your sister about it. Betty and her sister were really close. So Betty called her sister, told her about everything that happened that night, and Betty's sister's next door neighbor was a physicist. Happened to be over that night having dinner. So they mentioned this whole thing, talked about the whole thing, and the physicist that was in her company said, take a compass and move it around the areas of the car. So she said, okay, I'll take a compass. Didn't know what he was getting at. She takes a compass. She's walking around the car. As soon as she gets to these circles in the back of her trunk, the compass starts spinning rapidly.
Just spinning in circles.
Spinning in circles as soon as she gets to the trunk. Something to do, maybe a magnet, I don't know. But this was, when they were hearing the buzzing and the humming the night before, this was what they were hearing. It was they said something was behind them, kind of hitting the trunk area. So that's what kind of made them want to check this area out. So when they moved it close, it began spinning rapidly. When they took it away, it just went right back to normal. So what do you think is so far of... This is just the next day. They're still trying to figure everything out. Betty's all in on this. Barney does not want to talk about this at all.
Well, this seems... There's a lot going on. There's a lot that went on very quickly there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do I think so far? I think a spacecraft with a windshield is wild business.
We have spacecrafts with windshields.
We do. That is a good point. That is a great point. That is a great point, actually. How did you say he described these aliens? Like the little green men?
He said they had black suits and like caps. They said tight, shiny suits and caps.
So far, I'm thinking the CIA. It has to be some government shit going on.
Honestly, you wouldn't be incorrect in thinking that. And I'll tell you why.
Because the aliens work for the CIA.
No, this actually goes beyond alien stuff. It goes back to more down-to-earth stuff. Betty and Barney Hill were big parts in the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple.
That's what the photo I'm looking at looks like.
Yeah. And Barney was actually the local chairman of the NAACP, which was a civil rights movement organization. And part of the reason he didn't want this stuff to get out was because of his progress. He didn't want to be seen as a loon, because they were actually trying to get progress for the civil rights movement in the 60s.
Right.
And I have heard some people say, was it the CIA trying to derail people?
It's happened before.
It has. That's the thing. Is that, like, it does sound crazy, but this whole story is crazy. But this has happened before in the civil rights movement. There has been several times when the CIA has come in and tried to fuck shit up for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a ridiculous thing to think. But as the story goes on, things get a lot weirder. But,
hold on.
Yeah.
Another thing you mentioned was the concentric circles on the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
Did anything ever go further with that? Did the physicist ever look at it? Or did a physicist just tell her to hold the compass and she's like, whoa?
It ends at the compass. There is no photos. There's nothing else at the car, which I don't like.
That's the last of the car that we hear about?
That's the last of the car that we hear about from all the sources that I've read and everything. I don't know why there wasn't pictures of the car.
Mm-hmm.
There's pictures of the dress.
With or without the pink powder on it?
Without the pink powder, but with all the rips and tears.
Right.
I can show you that image as well. Here is Betty's dress.
Yeah, there are definitely tears in it. Possibly man-made, possibly alien-made. It's hard to tell right off the bat.
Yeah. Again, nothing to confirm their claim, but nothing to refute it either.
Right. Did anyone else happen to see this incident? Or am I getting ahead of you?
You're getting a little ahead, but no one else has seen this incident, as far as we know. But they didn't really know where to go from there. So, Betty wanted to report it. She wanted to talk about it. Betty was actually like somewhat of like an astronomy enthusiast. She was really into space, stuff like that. Her sister did claim to see a UFO at one time, like years before, like in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So she is interested. She was interested by all this. Barney, on the other hand, was like, no, shut up. We're not talking about this. We can't be seen as crazy.
Right.
Sort of thing. We'll lose our jobs. We're prominent in the community. All of it, right? So they're keeping this quiet. But Barney said, you can do what you got to do. You can report it. So on September 21st, Betty reported the incident to the Pease Air Force Base. She didn't want to be seen as insane because she was also nervous about this. Even though she was interested, she was also nervous. She did leave out a few details because of being afraid of what people would think of her. So the next day, September 22nd, she received a call from Major Paul Henderson, called her back to really confirm her report. And 5 days later, he reported that they had mistaken the planet Jupiter for a UFO.
Oh, classic.
Now, here's the thing about this. Paul Henderson reported this to Project Blue Book. Do you know what that is?
I've heard of it, but please refresh me.
Project Blue Book was basically the government's UFO investigative sector.
Right, the swamp gas people.
The swamp gas people. They claimed to be people who would like investigate UFOs, try to prove it, or like debunk it, see what they could do. In reality, they were there to cover things up from 1952 to 1969. So the fact that this report was submitted to Project Blue Book from a military guy, that's part of their MO.
Right.
And actually, they changed their report multiple times as more evidence came out. And now, to this day, on the Project Blue Book history, the Betty and Barney Hill case is submitted as data insufficient. Before it was said, mistaken as Jupiter.
That is a wild claim.
It is a wild claim.
Like, of all the things, like swamp gas would have been more believable than Jupiter. I'm pretty sure it's not that close to us.
It would be in the sky that night,
right.
But not flashing lights 50 feet above the car.
Not taking up your windshield.
Not taking up your windshield. It would be a dot in the sky.
Yeah, at best.
Yeah. So, this is kind of aggravating, but also no one really knew about this. This was like, just Betty, they're trying to figure things out, they're trying to keep it private. So Betty could not let this go. She wanted to learn more. She began going to libraries looking for books on aliens, UFOs, anything she could find. She came across a book by Donald Kehoe. Donald Kehoe is a retired U.S. Marine Corps aviator, and he was the head and founding member of NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is like a civilians UFO investigations agent. She sent him a letter. He was interested in the case, and he passed it on to a local Boston member of NICAP, Walter Webb. He was a Boston astronomer, NICAP member, and he agreed to meet the Hills on October 21st, 1961. This is a month later.
Right.
He interviewed the Hills for 6 hours, and they relayed all the information they could remember, but Barney stated that he had developed like a mental block. There were some portions of the event that he was like blocking out, like his brain wouldn't let him think about it. He described in detail all that he could remember about the craft, the appearance of the somehow not human figures aboard through the window, but that's all they could get. Webb stated that, quote, they were telling the truth and the incident probably occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties and technicalities that must be tolerated in any such observations where human judgment is involved, e.g. exact time and length of visibility, apparent sizes of objects and occupants, distance, height of the object, minor things like that. So yeah, people are actually getting involved. This is like Project Blue Book's involved, actual NICAP's involved. This is an interesting case.
There's a lot of things going on.
Yes, very much so.
A lot of people getting involved.
A lot of people are getting involved. Oh, and just a minor thing. Betty started having nightmares.
Oh.
Here's where shit gets fun.
Oh.
So 10 days after the alleged UFO encounter, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams. She stated that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity that she had never had before. After the 5th consecutive night, they stopped and never recurred, though they occupied her thoughts during the day. In November of 1961, so this is over a month and a half after the event, after the NICAP thing, after reporting it,
things are winding down a bit.
Things are winding down a bit, but she's still thinking about it. She's still kind of digging. She's still in her mind. Barney's like...
Yeah, she's not letting it go, and he wants it to go away.
Exactly. So, 1961, she began to journal these. She was like, this happened before. I got to journal what happened. She's writing them down, all the details of her dreams. In one dream, she and Barney encountered what they thought was a roadblock, and men surrounded their car, and when she lost consciousness and struggled to regain it, but she realized that she was being forced by 2 small men to walk in the forest at night. She also had, as she was walking through the forest, she saw Barney walking behind her, but as she called to him, he wouldn't respond. He seemed to be using like in a trance or a sleepwalking state. She said the men stood about 5 feet to 5 foot 4 inches tall and wore matching blue uniforms.
Short kings.
Short kings, exactly. So she said they had matching blue uniforms and with caps similar to those worn by military cadets. They appeared nearly human, with black hair, dark eyes, prominent noses and bluish lips. Their skin was a grayish color. This is where we got the term grays.
This is where it came from?
Yeah. This is the term for grays for aliens, the typical, like, that's a gray or a zeta sort of thing.
So how did their actual features look? Like their faces and their heads?
We will get to that in great detail.
Ooh.
Because this gets weird.
Because up until now, it sounded like
Mhm.
a bunch of dudes.
Yeah.
A bunch of dudes in suits and caps and
Mhm.
nothing other than everything surrounding them. They just sound like a government, if anything.
Yep. I can see what you mean by that. But here's where they go on the ship. In her dream, they were taken aboard the ship where this person that she called the leader told them that they would be separated for examination because it'll be a quicker process. She called the man conducting the examinations the examiner. As you do, checks out. She said he had a calm and pleasant demeanor. He told Betty that he was conducting tests to see the difference between their own species and humans. He sat her down in a chair and shined a bright light on her. He took a lock of her hair, examined her eyes, ears, mouth, throat, hands, legs, and feet, trimmed her fingernails, and used what she described as a letter opener to scrape off some of her skin into what appeared to be a cellophane, like just a cellophane wrap.
Right.
He then tested her reflexes, and then put a needle in her belly button.
Ugh.
This is where it gets weird. Apparently this caused excruciating pain, as it would.
As I can imagine it, yes.
Yeah, so she's freaking out. Apparently this needle was about 4 inches long.
Oh.
But the examiner just waved his hands in front of her eyes, and she immediately calmed down. Just like Jedi mind trick type of stuff.
Hypnotist.
It's funny you mentioned that. Then the examiner left the room. She began to have a conversation with the leader, who'd been paying attention to this whole thing happening. She tended to look at him and looked around the room, and she looked at a book. And she became kind of interested, and he told her that she could keep it. Keep the book. It's fine.
You keep the book.
Yeah, she could keep the book. So she's kind of curious about this. She asked where they were from, and he pulled down what she described as a star map. She said it appeared in like a 3-dimensional map sort of way. At the end of her dream, the men escorted her and Barney back to their car, where she states that a disagreement broke out between the crew. Turns out, this was over the book. The leader had given Betty this book, and turns out he told her that she actually couldn't take the book. They didn't want her to remember the encounter.
Small details.
Small details. So they're like, yeah, forgot. I can't give you that stuff. So she said, yeah, you can't take the book. They didn't want to remember the encounter. She replied, no matter what they did, she would remember what happened. And after she and Barney were taken to the car, the leader suggested that they wait to watch the craft's departure. They did so, and then resumed their drive. But when they got back into the car, Barney, snapped. But her dreams didn't really convey this well. She just kind of remembered this big flash ball of fire and then back in the car.
Right. Was there a title to the book or anything, or was that just a detail of the dream?
Just a detail of the dream.
Gotcha.
She couldn't recall. It was in a different language altogether.
Checks out.
Mm-hmm. On November 25th, they were once again interviewed by NICAP, this time by C.D. Jackson and Robert Holman. Robert Holman was an expert interrogator for the U.S. government, but had come down to NICAP to help with that as well. So he kind of knew a bunch of stuff. He was really lots of these NICAP guys have a lot of, I guess they got a rep. They're actually smart guys that are a part of this.
They don't just hire randos?
Not just hacks. I mean, there could be, but for the majority of it, there's a lot of smart guys in this. This is where they realized exactly how much missing time they had. They realized a whole full 3 hours were missing.
So are we out of the dream now?
We're out of the dream.
Right.
This is an interview November 25th, 1961. So this is where they realized how much missing time they had. NICAP suggested hypnosis, but Barney wanted nothing to do with it. But Betty was interested. Maybe the hypnosis could help stop her dreams, help them get past all this. So they disclosed what had happened to them through a few members of their church. and they put them in contact with Dr. Benjamin Simon. He was a neuropsychiatrist, praised for his use of hypnosis to help PTSD and war victims.
Do you think I'm kind of getting the feeling that maybe Barney remembers more than he's letting on?
I don't think so.
No?
And you'll find out why, but he remembers the craft, he remembers leaving after, driving after, but
nothing in between there, like the dream?
Nothing in between there, but this is where regressional hypnotism will help with that.
Right.
How much do you know about hypnosis?
I heard that when you're in the state of being hypnotized, you are very susceptible to suggestion, and people can basically have ideas planted in their heads or memories that aren't actual memories.
Yes, they can. That is very true. But the other thing about hypnotism is...
Also, at the same time, believe it's a load of hooey.
That's what I was waiting for. That's the answer. That's the James I know.
Hypnotism seems like the biggest fucking sham there is. I don't believe it at all, as someone who's never been hypnotized.
Okay. Well, little known fact, my mom was once hypnotized. She went to a show with my dad when they were dating.
A magic show?
No, a hypnotist show. It was actually like a famous hypnotist. I forget his name, but he was actually like a famous hypnotist. And he was here playing a show, and my mom got hypnotized to be like a biker chick. And she was like that for the rest of the show until he went like this and it snapped her out of it.
Having met your mom, that would be quite the sight to see.
Yeah, apparently my dad, my mom, apparently because of this guy.
Sweetest lady.
I know. It bothers me that, can't remember the guy.
Chris Angel, mind freak. John Hypnotist.
I'm gonna call my mom mid-podcast. I need to find this out. It's gonna bother me.
Use all the resources available to you.
Ravine!
The famous hypnotist Ravine.
He was. Okay, you watch Trailer Park Boys? Remember how they always compare Ricky to Ravine? Remember Conky?
Sure.
Conky, the little puppet goes,
hey there, Ricky. Should I say Ravine?
Yeah, I can't forget that puppet.
Yeah, that's what Ricky's getting compared to. Well, he has the big poofy hair, just like Ricky, and my mom grabbed the top of his hair and pulled it when she was being a mean biker chick on stage.
Oh.
Yeah. My mom was doing that. So, hypnotism in the way that we're looking at like cartoons.
Right.
That's like hooey, the watch, all that stuff.
Yeah, dangling in front of the face there.
That's not entirely real. But hypnotism itself, like clinical hypnotherapy, is actually something that can happen when used by actual professionals. So, like this guy, Dr. Benjamin Simon, he was a neuropsychiatrist praised for his use of hypnosis to help PTSD and war veterans. And it actually worked. It was actually like, this was a big deal.
Oh.
Because they basically can just turn that part of your brain off, sort of thing, if they wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, it like goes into your subconscious, things that your brain remembers, but you don't. Because it's all filed away. So anyway, they're thinking of doing a hypnosis. And Barney wasn't about it, but Betty kind of convinced him, this could be good for you too, because he's been having troubles too. He's been having all sorts of stuff that he didn't want to talk about. Lots of things are going on in Barney's life. This is where shit gets really scary.
This is where it gets scary?
Yes. So Barney was the one who didn't want this to happen, but he went in there begrudgingly. Now, when they set this up, they kind of separated the two so they wouldn't be influenced by each other. So if Betty went in for a hypnotist session, Barney wouldn't go, vice versa. So Simon started the sessions with Barney, and the man couldn't stop screaming. And this is recorded.
They recorded the sessions?
For 5 months. There's sessions upon sessions, hours upon hours of this grown man freaking out and whimpering. Under hypnosis with Dr. Benjamin Simons, Barney reported that the binocular strap had broken when he ran from the UFO back to his car. Remember, he could not remember how that strap broke.
Right.
He recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but afterward he felt irresistibly compelled to pull off to the side of the road and drive into the woods. He eventually sighted 6 men standing on the dirt road. The car stalled and the 3 men approached the car. Barney described the beings as generally similar to Betty's hypnotic recollection or the one in her dreams. He said the beings stared into his eyes with terrifying, mesmerizing effect Under hypnosis, Barney said, "Oh, those eyes." This is a quote. "Oh, those eyes. They're there in my brain." And, quote, "I was told to close my eyes because I saw two eyes coming too close to mine, and I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes." End quote.
This is terrifying. You're right.
Yes, this is recorded, dude. This is like you can find all this stuff on YouTube. And if you want to listen, I got the links.
I want to listen.
I know you do.
I want to hear this.
Okay.
We're getting somewhere now.
This is where another quote of Barney's, "All I see are these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just up close to me, pressing against my eyes."
Did he describe the eyes at all? Are they human eyes? Are they?
He described them as just black, lifeless eyes, and they did like a wrap around the head.
Sounds like a bad trip.
This is bad. And now if you want a clip, do you want a small clip, and then I can show you a bigger clip of what he was talking like?
I would love to hear that.
All right. So I went to everybody's favorite resource, TikTok.
That's where I get all the best information from.
Honestly, sometimes. So here's Barney talking about, this is when they're on the road. But the thing is that when you're talking, I would read you the transcripts of everything, but it's not as exciting. It just sounds like he's going about his day. He's talking about things like happen all day, going through it, and it's hours upon hours and hours.
Right.
But when you listen to it, you really hear like how scared this man is.
I say, my God, no. I have to shake my head. I got to, this can't be true. This isn't there. It's still there. And I look up and down the road. Can't somebody come and tell me this is not there? It can't be. And it's all.
Fast forward a little bit. This is what the rest of it basically sounds like.
All right, that's all. Go to sleep, Steve. You got to get now. You forget it now. You've forgotten. Calm now. Relax. I open the trunk of my car, and I get it. And I get back in the car. All right, just keep reasonably calm. And I put it in my coat. And then I get out with the binoculars. And it is there. And I look. And I look. And it shifts over. And I think, I'm not afraid.
So Barney's freaking out. Right.
Yeah, that is haunting, I would say. Haunting is the word I would use.
Barney is not only in the middle of the civil rights movement, he is a World War II veteran. He does not scare easily. This man is weeping on this guy's chair under hypnosis. Like Betty's dream, Barney said that they were separated once they got onto the craft. They told Barney to lie down on a small rectangular exam table. His recollection was more horrifying but less descriptive than Betty's. This was because he tried to keep his eyes closed through the experience out of fear. He said the beings put a cup-like device over his genitals, and although he did not feel orgasm, he thought a sperm sample had been taken. His
Thirsty boys.
Gotta get it somewhere, I guess. He thought a sperm sample had been taken. His account of the examinations were very similar to Betty's, though. Examining the same thing, hands, legs, all that, taking the fingernails off, all that. But instead of the long needle in the belly button, Barney said the beings inserted a thin tube in his anus.
Oh.
This is where the stereotype of alien probing comes from.
This is where it comes from. Hey, that poor fellow.
The poor fellow. Barney said that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language he did not understand. Betty also mentioned this detail, just like a mumbling language. But when they did communicate, it seemed to be in what he called a, quote, thought transference, or what we would call telepathy.
Right.
He couldn't think of the word.
Now, sorry, just to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
All the way to Betty's dream.
Yeah.
She had a bit of communication with these beings, correct?
Yes, she
in
did.
that dream.
Yep.
Was that also through telepathy, or was that verbal? Did it specify?
She stated it was more through telepathy.
Right.
When the creatures talked, it was more like this weird mumbly language. But so mainly the mouths did not move, and it was through telepathy.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
So that's consistent.
that is consistent. Also, when Betty was asked to draw what these creatures looked like under hypnosis, do you want to see that image?
I would love to see that.
This was under hypnosis. That's what he drew.
I see those eyes wrapping around like you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It is not a great drawing, I'm going to be honest.
It is a man under hypnosis.
It is. I'll give it that. I will give it that.
All he could think about was the eyes. It's like what he focused on. Barney stated that they were escorted back to the car, but he kept freaking out again. He was so freaked out that Dr. Simon had to put him in a kind of hypnosis that would cause him to forget the session right after waking. So he gave him a trigger that as soon as you wake up, you won't remember any of this. Otherwise, he was afraid he was going to wreck the man.
Right.
He's still in disbelief that this happened, by the way. He's still skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he doesn't want to believe it or anything else. Under Betty's sessions, the account was very similar to the dreams that she was having. The UFO abduction had some notable differences, mainly pertaining to her capture and release. Also, the technology on the craft was a bit different. The short man differed significantly in physical appearance, and the sequential order of the abduction differed a tad. But Barney's and Betty's memories in the hypnotic regression were, however, consistent with one another, and did match that way. So, Dr. Simon concluded that Barney's recollection of what happened was a fantasy that was influenced by Betty's dreams.
Interesting.
To him, it seemed the most reasonable explanation. Now, Simon was a skeptic. He didn't do this because he was an alien guy. He did this because someone reached out for help. The closest he got to like confirming they're aliens is like, I believe that they were abducted, sort of thing. He's like, without a doubt, they're being genuine, sort of thing.
Right.
So Barney disagreed with this explanation, though. While some of their narratives were similar, there were also parts that were unique to one another. Because some people say like, oh, their stories like so similar, they probably, faked it together. But then other people say, oh, there's differences, so they're obviously lying. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. That's the thing, is that some people will find a way to skeptic both ways. So he stated that even though some were similar, there's also parts that were unique, like when they went to separate rooms. And Barney was still skeptical until they showed him the tapes. And Barney was just quiet, and then fully came to terms that he was abducted by aliens. This was still not public. So, what are you thinking about this case so far?
So, I'm thinking a lot of things, actually. There's been a lot going on. There's lots of descriptions. There's lots of people involved in this.
Yep.
Various organizations.
Mhm.
Have you heard of this thing from 1953 all the way to 1964 called MK Ultra?
Yes, I do.
Do you think this could have anything to do with MK Ultra? CIA, LSD, brainwashing, hypnotism. There's a lot happening. There's a lot going on.
As far as I can tell, there's been nothing that connects the two.
How prominent were these two in the activist community?
More in the local community, but
Right.
they were prominent figures. But
Someone who could be seen as a threat, potentially.
maybe locally.
Right.
But the thing is MK.
Interracial couple in the 60s.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of stuff that points to that. But the thing is MK Ultra is mostly declassified.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of people connect things. Like Charles Manson being a part of that.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Like, you can connect these things now because the files are out. And to this day, nothing has connected Betty and Barney Hill to MK Ultra.
There's just lots of, like I say, there's just things that points away from aliens, let's say, such as the suits, maybe less so the communication and given this was a dream but a book, why would an alien have a book? That seems like a very earthbound thing, perhaps.
This is what Betty said, though. Betty
Yes.
called it a book.
Right.
She said you probably had pages and stuff like that. We don't know exactly what it was.
True enough. This was a description of a dream. Sorry,
Yeah.
I do think that, like I say, there is a lot going on. There are recordings.
Mm-hmm.
Those are wild,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to say. There's something's going on. That's for sure. It's hard for me to say what at this point.
Okay.
As my own skepticism,
Mhm.
Probably the same as lots of other people's. I can't help but think about other options as opposed to aliens.
I get it, but I do appreciate the fact that you're at least open to what people are saying about this. Lots of people just shut it down and don't listen.
No, there's definitely something going on, and there's a lot of factors at play, and got to consider the possibilities. Is it the aliens working with the CIA? That would be wild.
We're not that deep in the iceberg yet.
Oh,
We'll get there.
we'll get there.
Well, yeah. No, I get you. But you remember that star map that Betty saw?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something about a 3D star map.
Under hypnosis, she was asked if she could draw it. So she did. Now, at first, this looks like nothing.
Okay.
This is what she claimed to see.
That
And she asked for like information on where they were from and stuff like that, but apparently the being was like, how would you know? You wouldn't know any of these planets, sort of thing.
is an interesting drawing. There are lines connecting them, kind of like various constellations. Is that the word?
Constellation, but she claimed those looked more on the map like trade routes,
Trade route.
is what she called them.
Right. Is this thing on the right the ship?
No, those are part of the constellation.
Oh, I see.
She just drew the star map. That looks like nothing at first. and-
some dots and lines.
Just some dots and lines. But the thing is that this case was still private. Although they kept it quiet, they did talk to some people, like people at their church, family members, keeping it quiet, but just to let some things out. They were asked to come and talk at an event. This event was like it was by NICAP, and what it was like for abduction survivors type of thing, or like people who were interested. And they asked if they could do a small private gathering and talk about it, and they agreed they would come by, but they had to keep it quiet,
right.
part of thing. So they did that.
Has there been a history of alien abductions in the U.S. at this point?
At this point, there has been like some, but not like this.
Right.
Shit's pumping up. The thing is that still up until then, this was like all quacks, right? Well, here's the thing: is that this was a small gathering of people, but what they didn't know is that someone was recording it, and this got to a scum bucket named John Luttrell.
John Luttrell.
John Luttrell is a reporter for the Boston Traveler. Almost a year after the end of their hypnosis. In October 25th, 1965, a paper released by the Boston Traveler was titled UFO Chiller, Did They Seize Couple? Betty and Barney woke up to calls from Europe because of the time change. Overnight, they became international sensations. And they were freaking out. None of this got out. They didn't tell anyone. This wasn't supposed to be a thing. They were trying to keep this quiet. Right?
A real surprise to them.
Yes, so they're freaking out. They're like, fuck, we didn't tell anyone. We didn't know anything. They're opening up their doors to press. They're going to work, and they're having reporters following them. They're getting people from all over the world calling them, trying to ask them questions. They just want to be left alone. We didn't want this to get out. This was a big deal. And this is what gave the Hills their spotlight. Well, after a few weeks of this, they figured the best way to get on top of this is just to come out and answer whatever questions people have.
Right, be upfront with it.
Be upfront with it. Before people go after us, we can...
Cat's out of the bag, let's address it.
Exactly. This is over a year after the hypnosis. This is in late 1965. It's been 4 years since the abduction. Nothing's come out. So they came out, they did a small thing at their church. they wanted to ask people. 600 people showed up to ask questions. They asked questions, they answered honestly, they got through it, and the people applauded them for their honesty, and it was a big thing, and they got on top of this report. They didn't lose their jobs. Their careers were very understanding. They realized that this was a screw job by the reporter, but this was out now. So it's just something they had to deal with.
No going back.
Yeah. Now with this publication, there's also a book written about them called The Interrupted Journey in 1966. This caught the attention of a amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish. She saw the picture of Betty's star map.
Right.
And it matched almost perfectly with Zeta Reticuli.
Zeta Reticuli. I can't say I'm familiar.
Zeta Reticuli is a star system that lots of people believe are most likely to hold life.
Wow.
And that's where like things like the WOW signal were found. Lots of people send all the satellites. That's where they send them, sort of thing. So here is the image of Betty's star map.
Okay.
Here's Zeta Reticuli.
All right, go back to the Betty map. I'd say that's damn near identical.
This wasn't mapped yet. Like this wasn't like a full thing yet. Like it wasn't like a big thing. Like Betty didn't know Zeta Reticuli.
She didn't just read about it in the library.
There's UFOs and stuff like that, but they wouldn't have it like that. Marjorie had to actually turn it and find the exact perspective of different star systems till she figured out it was Zeta Reticuli. So the fact that the star map does actually align with an actual star system, and not only any star system, but the star system that we feel most likely contains life, is something.
That is something. That is a hell of a coincidence, if nothing else.
Now, the story gets a little sad. In 1969, Barney Hill did pass away of a brain hemorrhage at the age of 46, but Betty lived the rest of her life until 2004, where she died of lung cancer. But up until that point, she became very adamant about UFOs. Some things where I feel she got a little squirrely with it, but she was still an adamant believer, going to UFO fan cons, answering questions. This became a big passion and a part of her life. And she lived the rest of her life sticking to her story, never going back on it. And the only thing that changed is throughout the time she did say that she was visited more and stuff, but I'm focusing on what happened in the one case. So
okay.
Yeah. So that's mainly the story of the Betty and Barney Hill case. That's all we got. Betty drew more pictures of the aliens. She started drawing them a lot. They look pretty...
Get more and more detailed as she went?
No, they stayed the same.
The one you showed me earlier, was that Betty or
that was
Barney's?
Barney.
That was Barney's.
That was Barney in hypnosis.
Right. I'd like to see a Betty drawing. That is a lot more detailed, I'll tell you that.
I think she did the sculpture too. I don't know if it was her. So yeah, Betty was really into it. Up until the day she died. But yeah, nothing has come out, and to this day, reports are that there's insufficient data on the government side of things. So
yeah, there's definitely quite the story.
Mhm.
And it's not just backed up by nothing. Like you say, recordings, drawings, there's people from different organizations interviewing. And did Project Blue Book ever, did they ever have a response, a statement, a theory?
Their first theory,
other than Jupiter, was that just Jupiter and that's that?
It changed once it all came out. It changed to insufficient data.
That's right.
Because once it went public and people were start talking, Jupiter didn't hold up.
Okay. Hard to believe that Jupiter didn't hold up.
That's basically all I got on the Betty and Barney Hill case. I didn't go too much into the outside of things. There's a lot of things people talk about around the case. I'd like to stick to the case. If you want more recordings, there you can find them on YouTube. I also have the recordings. Both Betty and Barney were both recorded. Betty basically goes over what she went over. Would you like to listen to the Betty recording?
Oh, we can give a quick little hear a little clip of it.
Okay. Betty's is less dramatic than Barney's. Barney's is really one that fucking scary as shit.
It's gonna give me nightmares.
Yeah, try listening to the fucking whole thing. I did. It was horrible.
table. The table is not up very high, about the same height as the desk. So I lie down on the table on my back, and he brings over this how can I describe it? They're like needles. There's a whole cluster of needles, and each needle has a wire running from it. So then they roll me over on my back, and the examiner has a long needle in his hand, and I see the needle, and it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it, and he said just a simple test to won't hurt me. And I asked him what, and he said he just wants to put it in my navel. And it's just a simple test. And I don't know it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And even though it won't hurt, and he sticks a needle into my navel.
This is her talking about the belly button needle.
And I'm crying, and I tell him it's hurting, it's hurting, it's hurting, take it out. And then the leader, he goes over and he puts his hand, runs his hand in front of my eyes. And he says, I'll be all right. I won't feel it.
That's apparently when the hand goes in front of the eyes, sort of thing. So
She definitely sounds really scared. Just maybe not to the terrifying extent that Barney seemed to be in, but they both seem to have genuine emotional.
and that's why Dr. Benjamin Simon was like, they're telling the truth. I don't necessarily believe like there's what happened to them, but they believe what happened to them.
Did Betty have any sort of marks on her belly button?
I don't recall any marks. Lots of the damage was done to like their clothes and stuff like that. We don't know if like maybe they could have like some weird healing thing or something like that.
And I guess the needle too won't leave much of a mark as is.
Also, these sessions were taken 3 years after.
Yeah,
So if there was anything,
long
wouldn't-
gone since then.
yeah, they didn't remember.
Just another mark, if anything.
Yeah, she had bad dreams, but she didn't remember. Like it wasn't considered like something they actually looked into until 3 years later.
Right.
So, yeah, that's the Betty and Barney Hill case. So, I'd say like rank this on a scale of 1 to 5. I like the 1 to 5 scale.
1 to 5 scale. Oh, that's not a lot of room for
Well, here's how we'll do it. 1, absolutely don't believe it. You're a kook.
right.
2, there's something there, but I'm still not believing it. 3, I'm on the fence. 4, I think there's something to it. 5, I absolutely believe it.
Hmm. I'd say I'm probably right around a 3.
Okay.
Leaning. I'm kind of going back and forth between 2.5 and 3.5. So
Really?
I was just lying on a 3,
Really?
just because I can't help but think that I just can't help but shake the thought of drugs and government from my head. But there's definitely something happened. There's no question about that.
If it will help me convince you, there are no paperwork or anything that brings this together.
Like I say, 3, maybe even 3.5. Like there is definitely something there. There is.
The biggest part about this is the Project Blue Book being involved.
Right.
Usually if Project Blue Book is involved, there's something there. Because if there was nothing there, usually there's like, oh, it's just a kook. But if J. Allen Hynek and Project Blue Book get involved,
I don't doubt that there's something there, but what that something is what I'm wondering about. Because Project Blue Book, they're there to cover up.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they're there to cover up more than just aliens. They probably cover up CIA activities. They probably cover up who knows what. But
well, they were more for aliens specifically. I believe in the first month of them being open, they got 5,000 reports from aviation alone. Like, they were literally there because the reason it got started is because people in the sky were scared to fly.
Right.
They thought like they were going to hit these things. So they were there for like, figuring out what these were, if they were enemies of the state, stuff like that, or if they are from other worlds. But yeah, when Project Blue Book was involved, usually there's something to it. And also, there was a magazine, an astronomy magazine, that debated Betty's star map. And it was the first time any sort of alien or UFO encounter made it into a genuine science magazine. And was debated.
That is, yeah. There's definitely something there. I can't. There's no doubt in my mind something happened and they experienced something that was very clearly traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where it was even either erased from the memories or were just blocked out.
Okay.
3.5, final answer.
You know what? I'm happy with 3.5. The fact that I could get you over that hump, I feel happy with that.
Yeah, you did a good job. You've painted a good picture.
Don't blow me too hard. We're still recording.
Well, the recordings did help.
Yeah, and if you want to see more about those recordings, there's hours of them.
But I just can't, like I said, I just can't shake that there's something else going on there too.
Mm-hmm.
They're activists. They're an interracial couple in the 50s, 60s.
Yep.
They could be very well just be targets too. So it's hard to say one way or another.
I understand that theory, but I'm glad I got you over the 3.
Yeah.
So yes. I'll take it.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. It was very interesting. I learned a lot that I didn't know. I've heard about Betty and Barney Hill several times, but didn't actually, really know anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, you probably heard it from Joe Rogan talking about it on his podcast because he had their granddaughter on the podcast because she's a UFC fighter.
That's right. I think I recall that.
Yeah. So then she mentioned it after the podcast, and he was like, "What?" But yeah. Well, I'm glad I got you over the 3. Thank you everybody for listening. If you like what we're doing so far, this is episode 1. We're hoping to do more. Follow us on Spotify, leave us a review, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Or maybe wait a couple episodes for a review. We'll see. Don't be too harsh. We're sensitive people.
Don't hurt James's feeling. He's a soft little boy.
Not that little. All right. Bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.